So I'm David Wright. I know that the talk is called the FM and Procurement Gap. I'm not suggesting for a second there is a gap. I've no idea whether you all think there's a gap and you come here to challenge me. So maybe in 20 minutes or so we'll have a different view on that. So thank you first of all for coming and finding FM and procurement more interesting than leases, which is why I know you're here. So thank you for that. And a couple of minutes about me, because lots of new faces in the room here that I don't know, and therefore you probably don't know me. So on the left-hand side of that is, what I've done. And I literally put these slides together in a hotel last night after dinner. So on the left-hand side is what I thought was my first 30 years. And I realised it's not 30 years. I'm into my 4th decade in this business. And I just couldn't bring myself to change it and write 40 years up there. So in the 80s, I was a premises manager. I worked for a big Canadian insurance company in Hertfordshire, and I was their premises manager. Nobody had ever heard of facilities. We didn't have procurement. That was called purchasing. And they helped us buy our pens and paper and stationery and all that sort of good stuff. And in the industry at that sort of time, there were no facilities management. It was, just sort of embryonically starting. There was AFM and international, and the word facilities was kind of the F word. I know we talked this morning about or some people talk this morning about how the facilities people are seen. And from my point of view, I think facilities have got to drag themselves out of toilet conversations and all that sort of stuff if we're really going to get sort of strategic in some of this stuff. In the 1990s, I became a real estate director and property. So real estate and property were in my title, not premises. Premises went in the 80s, and we became either real estate and property. And I had a colleague who looked after all the office cleaning, toilets, paper, stationery, photocopying, and all that, and he was called Office Services, but nothing to do with facilities. That still wasn't kind of thought about then, and that's kind of the case then. It wasn't until we all got over the millennium bug and we all survived that, and those of you old enough to know about that will remember what a huge non-event that was, fortunately. Dreamt up by all the IT companies, and crikey knows who. At the time I was working for Dell Computers, so it was a really big deal for us. We stopped manufacturing computers in about end of October because we didn't want to put any bugs out into our... So running up to October, literally in every factory in the country, in the world, we were trying to build the next 3 months' supply so that we weren't building computers over the millennium when the bug was going to blow the world up and we were going to be responsible, and lawsuits and all that sort of stuff. So it had a massive, massive impact. And, we're all out rocking and rolling on... the Millennium Evening, I'm sure, and we were waiting for the bomb to go off and all that, and the disco didn't stop and the music didn't stop, and we all went to work the next day and we just carried on, and we spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on that. And then after that, we started to get more into the facility. And I know at this point, there were facilities management, but there's still purchasing. Sort of procurement wasn't kind of around then until not in my world anyway, until the after the millennium. And then suddenly we all start to focus on facilities and the real estate stroke property team, and they are coming together. And I certainly heard in the opening session that some of the people on the panel then have got some of those things under their regime. So before I get into the next slide, can I just ask for a show of hands? Could you put your hands up if you don't like putting your hands up at these conferences, please? Okay, well, excluding you two then, because I noticed a third of the people didn't put their hands up, and you're either one of them or one of them this morning. So who thinks they're primarily facilities? Right, about a third of you. Who thinks you're primarily property? 3 or 4, 5, 6, a few more. And who? Both, yeah. And who's procurement? Right, okay, so that's about the same number of the facilities people. I'm really glad we've got a good balance. And who's all of the above? Right, okay, that's smashing. Okay, good. So do you all get that? You sort of get where I'm getting to. So literally 2 more minutes on the way these things have sort of panned themselves out. And I'm now a consultant. I ought to just say that I've gone back to consultancy and I started my own little consultancy. I'm not here to sell anybody. I don't want anybody to come and say to me anything. I'm not here selling stuff. I'm just, other than my experience. And my experience has been, I've worked for big international corporations. I've worked for fancy media companies. I did the BBC moving up to Media City as in a consultancy role. I've done some really sexy stuff. And the thing I'd say on that front is that those of you who've got those big jobs, that have got jobs where you're travelling about and all the rest of it, you're in the good old days. And it's not until they stop that you realise that you're in the good old days. So if you're in a job which you really, really enjoy and you get out to all these fantastic places and you get to travel and meet different people, enjoy it. Because it's so easy to let it go past and suddenly it stops and you think, where did all that go? So really, really stop and enjoy that. I was talking to somebody outside who's just come back from Melbourne, didn't go and see the Opera House and all that sort. You're not in the room, are you? No, didn't like her. She didn't go and see the Opera House and stuff when she in Melbourne. That's because she was in Melbourne and not in Sydney. No, she was in Sydney. She went to Sydney and didn't take time out to go and do that sort of stuff. Now I've paid thousands of pounds to go and do that. So if you're in those sorts of jobs, go and do it. So anyway, the old traditional way that we all were in the 80s and 90s, we're all in house. Everybody was in house. Very little. Sort of no outsourcing. You might have had lots of contractors and there would be a lot of them, which is why you had a purchasing department to cope with all the purchase orders that you kept raising for everything from toilet roll to desks and furniture to carpet tiles to light fittings and all that sort of good stuff. And then if you get on a little bit more, you start to bundle all those services. And this is kind of an evolution of the FM sort of market that matches my career, if you can call it a career, over the last 4 decades. That suddenly the client starts to bundle those up and you can get into managing agent sort of thing. But again, lots of supply chain down here with lots of different companies, and some of you might recognise some of this stuff. I'm going to come back to these slides with the number of procurement people we've got in the room. And then you've got the sort of outside, so the client becomes smaller and the FM property teams become smaller, managing those relationships with those big outsourced FM companies, and they deal with all of the delivery stuff. Yeah, does that sort of sound about right? We'll kind of get that. And the way that kind of works is that we'll go from in-house, bundled, managing agent, stroke TFM. Now some of you will go, and I've been in places where you've gone one step to step 4 overnight, and it is a huge big step to take if culturally, employment of staff wise and so on and so on. And all of the FM companies, and I'm sure there's some in the room, so I'm not going to diss them, not I would anyway, will tell you that there's a cost saving of around 10-15% at each one of these sorts of steps. Okay, and I'm not disagreeing, or I'm not commenting on that, but that's kind of the sales pitch for that. And I've got clients, and I've worked in different places at every one of those steps, and for every company, and we just talked very, very briefly before you all came in, about how you can apply for the same job in a different company and it's a completely different job and you spend your day doing completely different things, but you've got the same job description, you've got the same qualifications and so on and so on. And I was kind of interested this morning, I don't know whether it was deliberate or not, but that didn't come up this morning at all in the session about internal partners.
We didn't get to that.
I know we ran out of time, and I was kind of itching to put my hand up knowing I was going to be in here with this audience today. But and I'm currently doing a role for a global top 10 company that's got more real estate than I knew kind of existed in one company. I've been there today. I've had to disappear and go there today. They're a few hundred yards from where we are today. But I'm working for the procurement team. So I am their real estate and property expert, but I'm working for the procurement team. So I'm working for the chief procurement officer. And it's a completely different way of looking at stuff. And if I was doing this presentation a month or so ago, it would be completely different to how it is today. And I'm really interested that there's a good mix of procurement and so on. So I'm not going to talk about IT and HR and all that other stuff because they're kind of given and they're different in every organisation you work in. Everybody's got a different relationship. And at the end of the day, I think it comes down to who you work with, who you can relate to, who gets what you're doing. And I like the comments this morning about the IT. I think the IT teams are going through an evolution of getting facilities. And they're either on the mainstream sort of system software integration, the business support stuff, and then there's desktop, the infrastructure stuff that we all have to deal with. And they haven't quite caught up with the maturer facilities business yet. So, we're used to having our staff work out of hours. We're used to having our staff do moves over the weekends. You go to talk to the IT guys about who's going to be in at the weekend, and they look at you as if you've asked them to saw their arm off, sort of thing. So I'm not going to spend any time talking about those guys. It's the procurement thing I wanted to talk about today, and whether there is a gap. And I know there's a gap, and it's different in different companies. And I've worked in a company, a big international software company, whose procurement team reported into the procurement hierarchy, but they sat with us in the property and facilities team. And what I wonder is, going back to this big company I'm working for now, I'm working for the procurement team. They've got a very small team. There's about 20 of them, and that sounds like a lot, but they've got over 10 million square feet in every country you can think of, and some that I didn't even know existed. And they do everything. You know, they literally do everything. And the procurement team are sat very much remotely in an almost contract management governance type position. And I found myself in lots of conflicts because I can't stop taking the property and facilities view, and I'm going to either get myself fired or I'm going to do a really good job because I want to keep taking the facilities view of procurement. And I keep being told that we've got to take control of this. I've been working on this project for a month, where they're doing a global outsource to one of the big global companies, and there's not a single facilities person on the project team. Yeah, that's exactly how I'm 3.5 weeks in, and I've not spoken to a facilities person. Yeah, and it's only the global vice president of FM that is aware that we're doing this project, and it's being driven by the real estate team. They own the relationship with this particular service provider, which gives you a kind of clue as to how the relationship's sort of formed. And somebody in the talk this morning said about you've got to get over the fact that all your real estate is managed in America. Your relationships are managed in America. If it's a global company, and I do believe that's absolutely true. Having worked at EDS and Dell, Amazon, all American companies, I know that their sorts of decisions are made stateside. But the procurement bit, what I wanted to do is to ask if you can all recognise these sorts of models, and I'm going to ask some of the procurement people to comment on where you fit in, and if the procurement people could let me know whether they just support the facilities and FM. So I met a procurement guy in an office a couple of weeks ago, and all he does is facilities. He procures facilities stuff. And I couldn't quite get my head around, so why aren't you the facilities guy doing that as we used to do in, I'm not going to say the good old days, but in these days, the facilities people did all the procurement of the facilities stuff. It's only kind of recently, I think, meaning the last 10, maybe 15 years, it's kind of spun off to become its own work stream and with its own agenda and so on and so on. And it's the facilities people who we haven't even spoken to in this big company that are going to inherit the contract. Lots of them are going to be outsourced, which might suggest that's why they don't know about it yet. And I kind of get that bit of it. But for us to start putting scopes of works together and service level agreements and so on without facilities seems, I just don't quite get it. And I find that I'm trying to argue with myself about why this is the right thing for the procurement teams to do. So of the procurement folks, who in the procurement teams that are here today only procure facilities and property stuff? Just one of you. So the other procurement people who put their hand up earlier, you buy all sorts of stuff for the company. You buy core items and stuff, do you, I guess? Everything. Yeah, so all the procurement stuff. So you only spend some of your time supporting facilities and property. Yeah. And that you're the only person you're the only one in the room. So can I just ask you, if you don't mind, were you ever in facilities? Have you been in facilities? How is it you've ended up procurement for facilities, and what sort of things do you... You've done it? Right. Right, okay. Right, okay. So it's the property, the construction management and all that sort of stuff.
I think you'll find that there's a lot of shift in procurement at the moment. There's lots of transition going on in blue chip organisations where they're looking at category management.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going.
So it's category management roles, which means you're dedicated to that particular category, whether it's IT, facilities,
Yeah.
quality, and you are the subject matter expert.
Sorry, I am, or you are?
You are, as a procurement category manager, are that subject matter expert for the business. In facilities. That's where it's going. Yeah, but that's a lot of businesses are moving towards that way.
20 years, I wouldn't ever call myself a subject matter expert. I'm a subject matter expert of procurement within property. I'm not a property or facilities subject matter expert. And I would never do
Yeah.
that property team.
Yeah.
But I am the procurement expert.
Yeah.
But not a property expert.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, because if I want something like a new van, for example, operationally, the unit that I'm heading knows what sort of van they want, but in terms of the rules of procurement, in terms of getting the best lease deals or whatever, best whole life costs, that's colleagues in procurement who will take a spec and then,
I'll give you another example about who's the subject matter expert. In a previous job, I had a team. I had a chartered surveyor and a chartered construction manager. Yeah, a chartered surveyor who purely did project management, quantity surveyor. Yeah, who did project management. And we went out and scoped a job, a fit out of a head office building, which was everything from carpet, tiles, furniture, M&E, all of the air conditioning, ceilings, lighting, decoration, the theme, the all new workspace type of stuff. And it went up. The budget was approved, etc., and the procurement guy, well, not hit, but the board said you need to show the procurement guy, just to make sure it's all been procured properly. And so, and I've been in the business for 30 odd years, and as far as I'm concerned, I've always done everything the right way, etc., etc. And the procurement guy kind of said to me, "I'm really, really disappointed that you haven't let me go out and take that to tender." I said, "Well, hang on a minute. You're the procurement guy. You've got to make sure we've got the right contract and do all that sort of stuff. What do you know about the cost of the fit out, the cost per square foot, what we're trying to achieve here as a change, a cultural change sort of step?" And it was kind of nothing. And we ended up falling out, which was a real sort of shame. And it's actually the reason why I left that company really quickly. Because I just didn't want to. I didn't want suddenly. I was a director. He was the procurement manager, who I had actually recruited, as it happens, to come in. Because at the time I was the director for property facilities and procurement, which is why I get to stand up and try and fill the gap between all of them. And we had a real sort of bust up. And I had to go and tell my quantity surveyor, my project manager, that they've got to hand all the drawings and the plans and everything else over to the procurement guy. Now, prior to him coming in, we had our purchasing procurement chap who sat with us as part of the team, and anything and everything we wanted to buy. And if it was what I would call pure procurement, and this is, I think, to get over the procurement of getting more and more and becoming more and more subject. This is the battle that I think procurement teams have got to win. Certainly with the facilities and real estate teams, I think that they can step up the subject matter expert ladder, if there is such a thing. And not only get used as the purchasing department, because young Oliver, that was our guy, would do all of our running. He would go and get quotes, and he would go and do the things that it was easier. It was non-technical stuff, yeah. And he would run a bid. He would run a tender process for us, but he would run a tender process for us on a scope of works and a service level that we'd kind of put together, and he would run it properly. It also gave me my audit trail. So from that point of view, I was happy that we're not going to the same contractor every time and all that sort of good stuff. So for me, and that worked perfectly. And then suddenly we had a procurement guy that came in who wanted to be, or had been told to be, the facilities subject matter expert and wanted to run every project. And there was only one of him, and we had stuff going on all over the place. So I'm kind of interested in, particularly when you move from that one to that one, where do procurement fit in? Now, the reason I say that is that this project I've just been talking about, and I'm part of the procurement team, I happened to say to the CPO 1 Kenobi, or whatever his name is, the Chief Procurement Officer, that in the proposal that we've had from this big outsource company, all your procurement team, who are doing what I think is your job, they're buying all the stuff on behalf of the company, will cheaply transfer across to the company. He said, "Oh no, they're not. And I don't, but all the facilities guys can sort of go over, but the procurement team are going to stay." I said, "Well, exactly what are they going to buy?" So this guy that I spoke to 2 weeks ago, who spent 15 years buying desks and furniture and carpet tiles and all that sort of stuff as part of project teams, all of his stuff is being outsourced. We're going to one provider that's going to provide all of that. Anybody got any views on the sort of procurement implants? Does it work better? I'd like it when I've got procurement down the corridor past HR, past IT, but definitely a partner. And it's great if you've got somebody that gets, and it sounds like you might be that soldier, that's kind of part of the facilities team. And if all you're doing is procurement stuff for the facilities and property team, I'm kind of assuming that you sit pretty close to the property and facilities team. The comment you've just made about the procurement team, and you've added to about the competency level, the rationale I went back when I slept on it to the CPO is to say he's got an opportunity, because I'm a consultant with the company, I'm on a 6-week contract with potentially to help them roll the thing out or not. So he's got to like me, he's got to think that I'm adding value, etc. And my first question in that sort of scenario is, what do we need to do to make you look good? And his answer was, don't make me look stupid. In other words, don't make, that thing I had with all the savings, don't have all that in one go, because somebody's going to say to me, what the hell have you guys been doing, sort of thing. And I do kind of get that. He's not been focused on it before, but he's got people that have spent, like the guy I spoke to a couple of weeks ago, that have been buying paper and pencils and paper.
Transactional though, isn't it?
It is. It is. So the opportunity for the CPO is to take his team up a level to the contract management, relationship management, at a real estate facilities director sort of level, in terms of owning that relationship. And that was kind of the key learning for me, that his agenda is, and he's going through it as well, because he's felt that he's got to be buying all, everything from, this pencil, that, and so on and so on. So he's kind of stepping up as well, and it's a big deal for them. I'm just kind of interested that everybody's got a different relationship with the procurement teams. They're either part of or not part of, or they sit in or they sit outside of. Who doesn't have procurement in any of, doesn't touch with procurement at all? No, so we've all got procurement people. Yeah, good, okay. I've done that one. So I was a bit surprised this morning. I know we ran out of time, that procurement wasn't up there ahead of IT. And I know the IT thing, we've got that infrastructure enabling and so on and so on. But I kind of felt that procurement is right up there. And the facility team have got to recognise that we're not going to carry on without procurement. You've got to embrace them, you've got to get them in. And the best procurement support that I've ever had is where they're actually sat there right with you as part of the team, and they embrace exactly what you're trying to do, your goals, you involve them in your team building exercises, they're part of your team. They might have a dotted line through the commercial route to the chief procurement officer or such, but if they're there solely to support your activity, then you've got to let them in. You've really, really got to let them in. I've kind of just sort of said that really, about where we were, the way that purchasing's become procurement and it's drifted in and out and been involved and not involved. And it's funny, but it's a bit like the real estate guys. When I started out, real estate really thought that the F word was facilities. They thought that was, that was the lower end of, we don't need to get involved in that. It's not strategic, it's not big. And I know you've all heard this 100 times. It's the domestic housekeeping side of things. But then suddenly we hit recessions and not everybody's doing property deals, and there's income streams to be got through facilities, and suddenly they are facilities, and the RICS and all those people suddenly want to start getting involved in facilities, and they want to start winning business in facilities because they can see how vertically and horizontally they can sell through FM. The transaction management, the project management, workplace that we're all getting involved with these days. And through all of those, I think that procurement team has got to, if they really are going to be, to use your terminology, the subject matter experts in FM, I'd like to see procurement people that have got BIFM qualifications or RICS or surveying, rather than pure SIPC, nuts and bolts and so on and so on. If they're really going to be subject matter experts, as you say, and you saw the sort of disdain in the room on that. So when does one become the other? Why hasn't somebody in your facilities team up there said you ought to come and work in facilities? And have they done that to you? Have you ever thought that they have to you?
Yeah, lots of times.
Yeah. So it sounds like lots of times means you've resisted. Yeah. And that'll be because, bearing in mind, you're not that close to the door and you've got to get out of here.
No, what I enjoy actually is also with a business lens. So I'm not really, and I don't think Joan is either, we're not the architects of procurement by low, by cheap people, but we're more understand the drivers of real estate and FM, and
Right.
make a strategy that fits according to those drivers. So, yeah,
You're facilities people through and through, really, aren't you?
sorry?
You're facilities people.
Well, we've resisted so far.
Well, that could be another session talking about what's facilities. And for me, property facilities, premises, real estate, it's all the one thing as far as a conference like this goes. And it's about whether that umbrella either includes under it, with it, next to it, by it, the procurement piece. And it is clearly different in different companies.
Why can't we turn that round, and why can't facilities people become procurement? And then you encompassed all of it as one turnkey solution for facilities, because if you teach FMs and real estate how to procure the services and understand contracts and contract management, surely if you can do it in-house that way, why would you need procurement who are, although they're procurement specialists, you can learn to be a procurement specialist. So
Then
why
you
not
could learn to be a facility specialist. That's been a bit derogatory to my job, saying, why can't the facility...
No, but you're saying that you didn't want to go into facilities, but why couldn't I go and do a procurement course and do my own procurement?
Yeah.
That's the way the business want to take it.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's that flick, 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 flick. That's kind of that, because in those days, procurement sat in here, and I've managed and been part of teams where we've got, and I remember when the forerunner of P2P came in, purchase to pay sort of systems came in, and every department that spent over whatever it was, in them days it was about 8 shillings and sixpence, but every department that spent any sort of money had a purchasing clerk sat in with them, and his or her job was to complete purchase orders. Yeah, so that you weren't the person that's saying to your friend, deliver me this desk. Yeah, that was going through the purchase order, so there's an audit trail, and it's not, that sort of stuff. And then, of course, we'll all know about you can't get that desk delivered without a purchase order, and all that sort of stuff. And that's when, and in those days, purchasing was definitely a facilities role. And you could take that purchasing clerk out and put them into facilities or IT or whatever it might have been in those days. It was a very administrative, clerical job. I think it's just sort of elevating itself now into, and has been for a while. Okay, it's probably a good job we didn't talk about procurement this morning then, because I've had nothing to talk about this afternoon. But so where do we all fit in? We talked earlier about we're all different, and you could go and do exactly your job in a different company, and you wouldn't do the same job. You'd call yourself the same thing, and you'd go and work for the same end, but you would be doing a completely different job in terms of the way you report, the way you're supported. It's completely different no matter where you go. And it's funny because companies evolve quicker in certain things that tend to be more business focused. So if my company's success is based upon my ability to get the IT systems to do X, Y, and Z, you'll find you've got a great IT support. If it's about operations and manufacturing or whatever it might be, you'll find that you've got fantastic factories and all that sort of stuff. But you can't, the office that you're sitting in is cold in the winter and boiling hot in the summer and all that sort of good stuff. So it's kind of funny. The other thing about procurement I was going to say is that procurement, I think, if they're going to do what you guys have just suggested about being subject matter expert, have got to keep at the front edge of the evolution of property facilities. I mean, this workplace stuff that we're doing, it's going to change. The company that I'm working, the reason that we're doing all this outsourcing thing is because we feel it's going to be easier, they feel it's going to be easier, to change culturally the company ready for their next big M&A, merger and acquisition. And they've just done one in 2015, and it's taken far too long. It's too difficult because they couldn't cope with. Right now they've got two completely different procurement systems. They've got two completely different standards for space. One's a sort of consultancy type background, so whatever you want, you're making money, whatever you want. The other one is more of an insurancy type, finance type house, and it's Rackham and Packham. So we're hoping that the new outsourcing company will help make those step changes a lot quicker, which seems a bit odd to me, that you're going to outsource all those things that are key to you being able to keep up with the pace of the company, etc. So I think it'll all be all right in the end, and if it's not, then we're not at the end yet. But I am. Unless there's anybody got any questions or any points. I think this would make a great workship, actually, rather than...
Change you're talking about is about having the resource. So if it's all in-house, you're limited with the resources you've got, unless you need to go out and get some additional consultancy. Obviously, we're all restricted by our own budgets. Whereas if you've got it outsourced, the expectation is that your outsourced supplier is sustainable, scalable, and it will grow. And therefore, they've got the resources. So if you say, we're doing this, they'll go, fine, I'll go and get the people.
Yeah.
Or I'll go and get more of another client for the temporary. So
Yeah.
actually the flexibility of that resource is a lot easier
Yeah.
to implement than it is if you've got to do it in-house,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah. Okay, I know I've not given you any answers or anything. I've just sort of raised a few questions. I don't profess to have any answers, but I think this would make a good hour-long workshop about how does it all work, how does it fit, what's the right model, you know, what, even a BIFM type thing, you know. But what I do think is that the facilities and property industries had better embrace procurement, because that train's already left the station in terms of it rolling, and if you don't, you're going to get excluded. So embrace them and get them in and get them to be part of your team, what you're doing, and so on. Can I ask who you work for, if you don't mind? For who? Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you very much. I think I've let you out of here. Hang on time.